paid for my tuition. Mama paid for my tuition.
Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are gathering today on traditional, ancestral, and ceded territory of Coast Salish people, specifically the territories of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I'm grateful to be guests on this land and honored the Indigenous people who have lived here and cared for this land since immemorial. As a newcomer who came to Canada as refugee, I deeply respect the Indigenous peoples who have welcomed newcomers and refugees while continuing their fight for justice and recognition. It means a lot to me to acknowledge the land and history behind it. Thank you for being with us here today, Norm. I'm honored to welcome you as a guest speaker in Refugee Talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me, Malad.
Thank you so much. I would like to also give a short introduction who Norm is. Norm Leech is Executive Director of Frog Hollow Neighbourhood House here in Vancouver. He is also a respected Indigenous leader whose work has deeply impacted the community, specifically in the areas of healing, reconciliation, and social connection. I'm here looking forward to learning from him today, and so as all of us, and hearing his perspective on community belonging. And definitely, I will go for the first question. Norm, thank you for being patient with me. I always wanted to ask this question first. Can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and also share a bit about your background and the nation that you belong to?
Okay, well, maybe I'll start in the language. Norman Leech and Squatchicha. It's good to see you. My name is Norm Leech. I'm from Tleetlet of the St'át'imc Nation. And our community surrounds the town of Lillooet on the Fraser River in British Columbia. So I was born and grew up in East Vancouver. My mom is a survivor of residential school. Growing up in Vancouver, I really wasn't connected to Indigenous culture very much. I was a city kid. Kind of knew that we were Native, we were Indians. But when I was very young, my mom married a non-Indigenous man, a white man. And the laws in Canada at that time meant that in that instant, she was no longer an Indian. So she had no right to live back home on the reserve with her family. And so she was already living in the city, but it kind of meant that she couldn't go back. And that also meant that I too was no longer an Indian. And so we simply had to blend into other Canadians in the city. But then later on, they changed the law. They recognized the law as being discriminatory. And so then those who lost their what's called Indian status got to get it back. So then we were Indians again in 1985. Then still grew up in the city, but we didn't know as much then, and certainly we didn't talk about the history of what had happened. Mom never talked about what happened to her in residential school. I had no idea about residential school until much later, until I was an adult. But by that time, growing up in the city and growing up Native and growing up poor, I ended up an alcoholic and an addict. Downtown, Skid Road. So did that for too many years. But eventually did stop. So I've been in recovery for more than 30 years now. But in that time, I did spend time at home with my uncles and my cousins, and got to learn about life in Lillooet and on the reserve. So eventually I did move home and worked in the community, and actually served as chief for 5 years of my community. And then also served another 3 years after that as the manager of the band office of the administration office there. Did build a house there, which I had to leave because I moved back to the city after all that, and then started working in various agencies, working for Indigenous people in Vancouver. And probably most recently, I worked with the Vancouver Aboriginal Community Policing Centre. So I served as executive director there for 10 or 12 years. And that's probably where I learned most of the things that I talk about now. I understood the history of Indigenous people and the Indian Act and the history of colonization, because we had to explain it to Police Academy and Justice Institute in a way that they could understand how Indigenous people reacted to the history. And then after that, I ended up working at the Frog Hollow Neighbourhood House, which is where I am now. And it sort of expanded all that previous work to many parts of the city now. So we seem to be disrupting colonized systems in multiple areas in the city now, which is exciting, but also a lot of work.
Right.
Yeah. So that sort of leads to the work that I do now, and even working with refugees, with newcomers, and it's and building relationships and gaining understanding across cultures,
Right.
and across faiths, and helping people understand that we have common histories and common interests, and actually we can be amazing allies.
Thank you so much, Norm. Again, it's honor to have you in Refugee Talk, and thank you for sharing about yourself and doing all this wonderful work at in our community at Frog Hollow.
Yeah, that's just my day job, right?
Thank you. I would like to also ask that many refugees and Indigenous people share. I don't know. Like I know they don't share the same pain because Indigenous people have been through a lot, but many refugees had the same displacement of trauma and culture survivor. And then, in your view, what are some of the common struggles of strengths to connect these communities?
Well, the very basic one is disconnection. Disconnection from land. Disconnection from our original land. When I do land acknowledgement, I acknowledge the land as our ancestor, as our first grandmother. And so we have lived in our lands for 10,000 years continuously and more. But then so did your ancestors somewhere, someplace. And then think about it. They lived in one place for so long, and they knew that land, and they loved that land, and they knew everything about it, and it gave them everything. And that connection, that relationship with that land was everything. To be without it was unimaginable. And yet that's the consequence of colonized systems, is to separate the original people from their original land. And that is trauma. That is to be separated from your original grandmother, the grandmother who has surrounded you and bathed you and soaked you in love for thousands of years. And then suddenly you're forced to be away from that source, that original source of all food, all water, all love. Now, almost the rest of your life is trying to heal that trauma. And that's a diabolically ingenious strategy and method, of colonized ways, of colonization. And I don't know if it's even possible to heal it.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. It's I think displacement, as you mentioned, when they're displaced, it's they have been far away from their land. I mean,
so I talk to newcomers at the neighborhood house, and I say, your body knows how to connect to land. You have a sense of connection in your body. Can you feel that connection to land? And some of them say, you know what? I can't. Because I know I lived here, my parents lived there, my grandparents lived there, and now I'm here. And they're all different. And I don't feel that I have the right to connect here. And I don't know where my parents and grandparents were, so it's a kind of imaginary. So I don't know that I'm allowed. I'm not allowing myself to feel that connection to land somewhere. And I say, all the land is connected anyways. So if you can feel that connection here, then awesome. But that's a relationship that you have to remember. You have to let your body remember how that is. Relationship of love is supposed to be. So this made sense to me in meeting people who have done the ayahuasca ceremony. Have you heard of ayahuasca?
I have not.
So it's a plant medicine down in Central and South America.
Right.
And so people, and it's quite a process to make it. But people will travel thousands of miles and spend thousands of dollars to go to these places. And then they'll drink this concoction.
Right.
And it's kind of a psychedelic. And they'll be in circle, they'll do it in temple, they'll do it in ceremony. And somehow in that experience, the plant spirit, they sense the plant spirit speaking to them. And then they feel an amazing connection to Mother Nature. Because I was asking him why you do it. And that was when I realized you don't feel that all the time, that connection to Mother Nature. And that was when I realized that's what happened to you people. And I had to explain to him, it never went away for us.
Right.
We feel it every second of our lives, that connection to Mother Nature. But if you separate a people from their original land and you teach them that they are not connected and that sense of connection isn't real, then they will feel disconnected and they will feel alone. So then that explains why so many people feel so disconnected and lost.
Right. And also, Norm, when you said about the refugees that you asked them, do you feel connected? I mean, as someone who came from Afghanistan and then as a newcomer, I do feel connected, but when I say that I'm also not connected, possibly because of the so much war that happened on us. And also, to be honest, I personally don't know about our ancestors.
And so I learned a specific form of therapy, trauma therapy, to help people heal. And so if you heard of Gabor Mate, doctor, downtown East Side counselor, therapist. So basically his findings state that the opposite of trauma is connection. And the root of most traumas and substance uses, misuse and abuse and mental health challenges is disconnection.
Right.
And so the cure or the solution is to reconnect people. But then looking deeper from an Indigenous perspective, what is the root and the source and the beginning of our disconnection? Colonized systems. For us, we understand that before, we were connected to everything. We all have a saying that we use in most Indigenous peoples across the continents, across Turtle Island, have a way of saying in their own language, all my relations, which means all my relationships with everything, everywhere, everywhen. that we are in relationship with all of it. We are part of, we are connected. We are never apart or separated. That way we are never alone. And that's almost the root of the difference between colonized worldview and ways of being and uncolonized worldview and ways of being. And it's almost an objective. It's certainly the outcome of colonized systems, is to make people feel disconnected and alone, and in that way powerless and helpless and weak and afraid. But if you understand that you are not separate from this land, that this air and the space between us doesn't separate us,
Right.
It joins us, we share it. And then you know that you are part of the land, you are part of this community, you are part of this planet, and you are not separate from any of it. And if you are connected to all of it, then you have access to all of it. And she is our source of health and medicine and everything, our food, our health, our water, forever, because she loves us. And if she loves us, then the planet loves us, and the solar system loves us, and the universe loves us. And the evidence of that is that you were born a human being on Earth, and that is the lottery win of the universe.
Right.
Right? You get this brain, this mind, this body, this planet, this weather, this food, these people for a little bit of time. You get all that. And you gotta admit, it's an amazing ride. And you get to have it for a little bit of time. And really all you're supposed to do is take care of the place. And somehow someone's convinced us that we should want different or more or better or someone, instead of just notice, just have a look around and say, man, this is awesome.
Right.
Like if we look at the seconds of your day, how many seconds of your day were awful today? Hardly
So
any.
much.
How many of the seconds were awesome?
Mm-hmm.
They're amazing. Just to experience the feeling the sun on your face, right? To know that those photons started 7 minutes ago, from the sun. Took them 7 minutes to get here, get through the atmosphere, and they're just the perfect amount to feel the warmth on your face.
Right.
Then once you recognize that, it makes it easier to be happy and grateful.
It's beautiful, Norm, to have that feeling of enjoying every second. I've interviewed and I've seen refugees, and even myself. Refugees, most of the time, they try to enjoy the life that they got right now in Canada, but sometimes it's really the situation. As we talked before the interview, life has locked them so much that they can't get time for themselves to heal themselves in this beautiful land. And what are your advice? What they should do apart from the strategy that you mentioned, that believe in the land, that connect yourself with the land?
Well, if you can connect to it, then you can draw on it as a source of healing and medicine, and ultimately love. If you have a recognition, even an awareness that the land must love you, then and let that into the cells of your body, then your body can remember what it is like to feel absolutely and completely loved. And that will help rejuvenate, restore, maintain your health and your well-being. Also to stay happier, but it also helps develop those muscles of connection. That those are the senses that we have that have been denied. We haven't been taught about them. If you have a sense of connection to all things, then you know you're never alone. The land is with you. The ancestors are with you. And you have access to that wisdom and to those healing medicines. And also to remember that all the traumas that we faced, we survived.
Yes.
We already survived it. You did it. Awesome. Take credit for it. Celebrate it. Then also remember that the reason you survived is because your ancestors passed down their tools and skills and gifts of survival too, because they also survived almost every trauma that they faced.
Right.
And you also have to remember that not everyone survived, but your ancestors were the survivors. And so you inherited all those gifts, those of how to run, of how to fight, of how to hide, how to lie, whatever it was needed to survive. They did it. And they survived so that you could be here today.
Right.
And you have all those gifts, and I call them superpowers. And you have them, and you inherited them from your ancestors, including the traumas. But the survival skills and the survivor spirit was more and more powerful than the trauma. So remember that. And there's a reason that all that survival happened so that you could be here.
Right.
And so together, those of us who have survived those things, we've learned through the generations all those survival skills. We just have to let our bodies remember them.
Right.
Because our bodies remember differently than our minds. And if we live most of our lives in our heads, then we're missing out on all that wisdom that's stored in our bodies. So a big part of what I do is helping people notice, teaching them how to notice those things and pay attention to those other things. Yeah, and some people call it intuition or your gut feeling, but we know we rely on it, we depend on it.
Right. And also adding to that piece, Norm, that you said that you always make people to remember this, and also you have helped refugees in Frog Hollow. And also, what are your thoughts about what is missing that we are not doing for refugees or for newcomers that they really need urgently when they come to Canada as the starting of their life here?
Well, I often say these colonized systems, they're diabolically ingenious in the way they're designed and the way they're implemented, the way they're operated, because they're designed to separate us, to divide us, to isolate us, to make us feel alone, to make us feel weak and powerless and helpless. And so they do that for everyone. So, of course, that makes it harder. So really, the best thing that we can do is start to connect people to us, to Indigenous people, to the land, to each other, and to realize, but also to teach them about it, because we don't have words for it. We don't talk about it. We say, oh, we should share a meal. We should spend some time together. We should have a friendship. But until we recognize that it is the connection that really, and how to notice that connection and feel that connection and work on those muscles of connection, that sense of connection, to realize that you've been taught that it's not there, that it's not real, that it's not important. But it is really the source to access all the healing and the medicine and the power that the land has. So we hear that research says that if people get 20 minutes a day in nature, that they have positive, measurable health benefits. So that means then if you get 0 minutes a day in nature, you don't get those benefits.
Right.
And you are probably worse off. So that means all those children in inner city schools around the world who get 0 minutes a day in nature, are experiencing a kind of trauma because they've been separated from their original grandmother, the source of everything we've ever eaten or drank or used as medicine or shelter. And we're separated from her. So we forgot what that feels like to be loved by her every second of our lives. So I call her grandmother because if you're lucky enough to have a grandmother who has held you in her lap and wrapped her arms around you and told you, you are awesome, my lad. I love you. You are amazing. You're wonderful. I love you. And it's going to be okay. And if your body remembers that feeling, then you know how your whole life should feel. Because she loves you like that every second of your life. But we've been taught not to feel it, that it's not real. And if people understood and felt that connection, they wouldn't be so afraid, they wouldn't be so hurt, they wouldn't be so traumatized, and they wouldn't hurt other people, and they wouldn't hurt her as much as they do. So in my work decolonizing, and the biggest side benefit of understanding an indigenized or an uncolonized worldview compared to a colonized is that it's healing.
Healing.
And once you understand that and you do more of it and you start to heal and you start to be happier, then it's just, that's the real payoff.
Yeah.
Not changing the world, but helping people be happier.
Right.
And then they're healthier and stronger and able to help other people to do the same. So that's what we hope to plant more seeds of those ideas,
right,
and those activities and those learnings.
I think it's one of the beautiful things to be happy and feel connected.
Comparatively, yeah. Like, whatever challenge you're facing, if you're trying to do it alone, it's tougher, it's harder, it's worse. But if you have at least someone with you, beside you, and you're not alone, man, it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
So that's really what we help people do, is learn how to stand beside each other.
Right. Thank you, Norm. One of the other part that I was also searching for, then so was a lot of newcomers, and when they come to Canada, they're lost. I know there are non-profit organizations, amazing neighborhood houses like Frog Hollow, Mosaic, Ice of BC, or Success, all of them.
Mm-hmm.
But they also like to connect, especially for myself. I have been when I came to Canada, before coming to Canada, I did not know about Indigenous people.
Yeah, it's a big secret.
I did not know. And when I came to Canada, I started anti-racism at UBC. And that's when I started learning more about Indigenous culture. And similarly, like me, there are a lot of newcomers that are so interested to connect with Indigenous people and the culture, to know like what happened. And how can we do that if you can show us a way to connect with the culture and learn from Indigenous culture? What does this land mean to them?
Well, we're still learning too, right? So we're still in it. We're in survival mode. Like, Canada has admitted cultural genocide and actual genocide. And so from the beginning of colonization, exploration, it has been a process of us dying. And we were this close. We were very close to extinction. Probably our survival rate was somewhere between 1% and 5%. So we were almost gone because of diseases, right? Things that we had zero immunity to. But also practices and policies, right? This country, these laws in this country imprison us way more and way more often and for far longer than anybody else. They take away our children far more effectively than anybody else's children. There's a war on Indigenous people still in this country because we are the greatest obstacle to completing the project of colonizing all our lands. So we are in the way of that goal. And so they need to keep us distracted and busy in order to complete that goal. So when we understand that, then we can understand also that colonization wasn't invented here. So because we're still in it, we're not in a good enough space yet, healed enough space, to really form strong relations with newcomers and refugees to learn how to work together effectively. We're still in reaction to our original trauma. And that reaction often ends up as anger. Because the four standard reactions to trauma is fight, flight, freeze, collapse. And we're still almost stuck in those four because we're still fighting for our survival. So you can't just go from 400 years of cultural genocide and then suddenly say, the next day, say, well, actually now we're going to guarantee you cultural safety. Yeah, I don't believe you. Which is what they're trying to do now, is say, okay, let's everybody get cultural safety training so that Indigenous people can feel safe. Yeah, we're not just going to take your word for it because it's not safe yet. It's safer, but it's not safe. So, and the other thing is when we talk about our connection to land, and it's our source of health and healing, and how the loss of that is the biggest root of trauma. Remember, we never really had to explain it to anyone else before. So only in my work with the Community Policing Center and trauma training and working with the so-called justice system and the VPD and working with circles of grandmothers has all this start to become clear, so that we are finding ways now of explaining it to other people so that they can understand and help your bodies remember what it was like to feel connected to land too. Because it's hard to explain, especially in this language that is not ours. And our language, our many languages, have been almost destroyed. In our languages, we knew how to say those things and explain those things to each other. But also remember, we never wrote any of it down either. So we're in the process of learning how to explain it to ourselves in this language, and then also explain it to others in this language in a way that we can all understand together, so that we can have the deeper conversation about how your ancestors learned these things from the land. And because your land was different, and it was amazingly different there, but ours is unique here. But really all the land is connected. And she's the same grandmother throughout the world. But she taught so many different languages because the land was so different in so many different places. And so we learned different lessons from the same grandmother. But she didn't teach us how to, because even in the old days, we had to learn the 7 languages around us. Right? Because we had to, because we couldn't marry within. We had to go, if I wanted to go meet a girl, I had to go speak their language. Right? So we would learn the 7 languages around us, but now we're stuck with one. It's a kind of poverty. We have language poverty now. So you have more. You have 2 languages. Do you have more?
Yes.
See, so you're lucky. But they wouldn't. They only taught me the one. And that's a diabolically ingenious tool of colonization, to separate people who don't speak the same language.
Especially when I studied about the Indigenous people, when I learned about the residential schools, they forced kids to forget about their Indigenous language, and then they forced that if you speak Indigenous language, they used to nail their tongue.
Well, with a pen.
With a pen, sorry.
Yeah.
With a pen.
Yeah, punishment is terrible.
And only you're allowed to speak English. That's what they used to say.
But that wasn't invented here. That technique, that strategy was used everywhere. Like the people of Ukraine were forced to only learn Russian, right?
Right.
In Japan, the Ainu people were forced to learn Japanese. So there's a well-proven strategy of colonizing people, and we're sort of learning those many tools of colonization: the written laws, the language, the education systems. If you control those things, you win.
Right. Norm, so I know you mentioned that you grew up in Vancouver, but are you able to speak your mother tongue language, like fully?
No, just a little bit. I learned a little bit when I moved home. I want to learn more, but I'm getting a little old to learn a language.
No, Norm, you're not getting old.
I can speak a bit, and I can at least make the sounds, but I would like to have more time to learn the original language.
Right. I'm also, Norm, me and people who are watching, and even like a lot of people are too curious about when you say home, the place that you came, specifically the place that you said you went there you learned something and then you came back. How does it look like? Everybody speaks Indigenous language, or how is it?
Hardly. Very few fluent speakers left. The tools of colonization are very effective in wiping out those languages. Because my grandparents spoke the language fluently,
right,
but they refused to teach it to their children, because they knew that if their children spoke any of those words in residential school, they would get punished for it. So they wanted to spare them from it. So that lesson was taught hugely effectively. So parents refused to teach them the language because they knew that they would get punished for it.
Right.
So that was done out of love, but boy, all of them probably wish that they had done it anyways now. So we have it stored, we have dictionaries, we have, we've recorded lots of language, and so it should be possible to bring it back. But I'm going to let the younger people do that.
Right.
So there was at least 25 distinct languages in British Columbia alone, and all of them are critically endangered. Probably the only Indigenous language in Canada that's not critically endangered is Cree, because it's so widespread, and it wasn't nearly eradicated, because it was quite widespread. But the British Columbia, we had smaller territories, and each one had their own language.
Right.
So I compare British Columbia to Europe. Right? Europe is quite diverse: French, German, Italian, Spanish, English, Swedish. All look the same to me. But if someone said, "Well, oh, you're European, you all must speak the same language," they would say, "No, of course not. We don't speak the same language."
No.
But to expect Indigenous people in British Columbia to speak one language, no, we don't. We're very different. Right? That diversity can exist in small areas.
Wow. And is there any other ways that people can learn Indigenous language? I mean, I remember I have asked you once I wanna learn Indigenous language, except English. I want to learn another language that belongs to this land.
Yeah, so there are some university courses. Some linguists have created curriculum and coursework in various languages, ours included. There's some agencies that teach Cree in Vancouver, right. So some informal Cree language classes. And even universities teach Cree, but Cree is not endangered. So, but then you're more likely to at least find someone else to talk to.
Yeah.
Right? What's the use of having a language if no one else can talk to you in it?
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah. So that's the challenge. It's usually best to either have someone else who's learning the same language and you can support each other in that. But then you'll also find that the beauty in the languages, the ideas, the concepts,
yes.
And then because the way the language is created, you infer other wisdom. Say, oh, that's why they do that. Oh, that makes so much sense.
Yes.
And because then it teaches you about the relationship with land and how the idea that we're all connected and we're part of and we're not separate, it shows up in the language in subtle ways. But only if you learn the language.
Right. Just now it came in my head that if I try to learn the language, and if even most of the Indigenous people were forced to speak English, and then who should I communicate to then? Or where should I go? I should go to Nanaimo to see people speak the same language that I'm learning, or to know to see more Indigenous people. Norm, I've seen very less people and less Indigenous people in Burnaby, Surrey, Langley, these areas.
See, so maybe that's
I can help with that if you turn off airplane mode.
I'm so sorry for that.
No worries. So maybe that's a way that technology can help us find each other, right? To find those other language speakers so that we don't have to, oh my God, I can't be there on that day. Oh, that's too far for me to travel. Oh, the bus won't work. We can meet virtually and speak language with people from anywhere in the world and find those 8 people who speak that dialect of that language and get together. And if we use those tools effectively for us rather than against us, then we just have to learn how to, I say, disrupt the colonized systems and then hack those colonized systems for our benefit.
Right.
Because we're so used to them being used against us. So we just have to learn enough about them so that we can flip them around and use them for us instead of against us. And that includes refugees and newcomers and migrants. Because, if I asked you, are you Indigenous? What would you say?
No.
No. Why?
Because I'm not from this land.
But you are from some land, somewhere. You are Indigenous to somewhere.
Right.
Now, the next question is, can you feel that Indigenous connection to that original land?
Right.
It's in there. Your body remembers, but your mind says no.
It's so confused. Mind is everywhere.
Yes, and that's another more indigenous way of being, is to understand that we're supposed to be in balance. And have you seen a medicine wheel, a circle divided up into 4? Heart, mind, body, spirit.
Yes.
So the heart, the mind, the body, the spirit, they're supposed to be in balance. Right? So how much of your life is spent working on spirit? How much of your life is spent working on heart? How much of your life is spent working on body? And how much of your life is spent working on mind? Are you out of balance? Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
99% of my life was spent in my head. Not so much anymore. I'm trying to move towards balance.
It's never too late. No.
Never too. I didn't really start yoga till I was 48.
Wow.
And now it's helping balancing my body and mind and heart so I can get to spirit.
Right.
But before that, it was 99% head.
There's this quote that I totally forgot, that we spend more time in our head than reality.
Yeah. And now we're spending more time in virtual reality than in reality.
Thank you. Yeah.
Me included. Boy, it is addictive. These colonized systems are brilliant at finding our addictions and feeding our addictions and taking advantage of our addictions.
Right.
Whether it's just those little dopamine hits, right? Little bits of dopamine. And it keeps giving them.
It is. I want to ask one more question, Norm. I'm sorry I'm asking so many questions. I'm too curious and interested to so many questions about Indigenous people. What you as Indigenous, or what about or other Indigenous people, what do they have, what are their thoughts about refugees? And when people coming from other countries, what are their thoughts?
It's complicated because we were here first.
Right.
We've been here for 10,000 years and more. And we've been at the bottom. Like, of every negative social health indicator that's measured in Canada, we lead, right? Our education is lower, our income is lower, our imprison rate is higher, our children in care is higher. We die of almost everything faster and more often than everyone else. And we know how fabulously wealthy this country is in resources. This is the second largest country in the world and has a tiny population of 40 million people. And it's only as amazing as it is because we took care of it for 10,000 years. And we are not benefiting from the vast wealth of the resources that we stewarded and maintained and took care of for 10,000 years. We are shut out. And so then to see all these other people benefiting from the vast resources of our lands ahead of us, and they got here way after us. So if we compare, say, the lifestyles of the Saudi royal family,
right,
who control the resources of their land, and they have a much smaller land, and there are much fewer people. We should live like the Saudi royal family on our lands, and we don't. We wouldn't, because we never did, but we would expect to have some place of respect and authority in our own lands to help everyone else understand how to live in the lands. Because if we move to someone else's land, we would ask the people who've lived there the longest, how do you live here in a good way? How did this land teach you to be good human beings on these lands? We would ask them.
Yes.
And we would learn how to be good human beings on those lands. And whenever someone asks us in our lands, and they come into our lands and they ask us, we tell them and we teach them. But in Canada's case, they hardly ever asked.
Right.
And still, they're not asking. So it's complicated because there's a resentment. And we've experienced 500 years of cultural genocide. And now some people, newcomers and refugees, are coming and they're asking, and they're sincere. But there's a built-up resentment towards all the behavior and the treatment and the policies and the laws of the past. So that's a conversation that can be difficult, but it can be done in a good way to offer alliance. Because really, I think we're natural allies. Because we're both suffering under the same systems, and we both have everything to gain, and we both have very little to lose. So that makes us powerful. and dangerous if we understand that we've been divided and separated and pitted against each other by someone else.
Right. Thank you so much, Norm. Everyone, people who are watching, especially newcomers, you have heard what Norm said. It's same pain, same struggle, but you just have to find out yourself.
We'll build relations, we'll
Yes.
create understanding, and we'll find the common interests, and then we'll find the common goals that we can agree on, and then we can learn how to walk beside each other
Right.
on those fights. And it has to be both ways, right? If we ask you for help and you can help, awesome. But you also have to be able to ask us for help, and we provide help too. And that's how we build strong, mutually beneficial relationships
Right.
and alliances and coalition among community, built on actual person-to-person relationships.
Right.
And then we gain friendships, and then we gain happiness, and we gain sharing food and celebrations and enjoying life.
Right. I love the sharing food that you mentioned, Norm. The saddest story is that the majority of newcomers, they don't know much about Indigenous people, which is sad. The school never talks about it. Society never talks about it. It's hand-hidden, as you mentioned. That when I told you that I did not know about Indigenous people before coming to Canada. As you mentioned, yes. So because it was hidden.
Well, why would Canada share its most shameful history with someone that is trying to convince and entice? Come here, come to Canada, live here, work here, prosper here. Oh, but by the way, we treat Indigenous people badly. Oh yeah, we've treated other people badly. Jewish people, Sikh people, Chinese people, Japanese. Yeah, we've treated them all badly. But you, no.
You come.
It's like if you meet a girl
Yes.
for the first time. Do you tell her all about the worst things that you've done in your life?
Absolutely
No.
not.
You make a good impression.
Right.
And so, of course, that's what Canada does to the rest of the world, and it does a great job at that. But you've got to remember that there's a lot Canada is not telling you.
Right.
And, of course, it's always the worst parts.
Right.
Why would they?
And I would also suggest newcomers to, if you want to know the real story of Canada or Indigenous people or this land that you're sitting right now, you just talk to an Indigenous person first.
Yeah.
I would say actual person who knows about the land.
Well, like I say, it can be complicated. Some Indigenous people are angry,
Right.
unhappy, resentful. They're in their trauma still. And it takes work to get past that and to recognize that, yes, Canada did those things, and maybe the RCMP did those things, and maybe the school system did these things, and maybe churches did these things. But Malad didn't do these things. So
Right.
I have no reason to be mad at you for it. But it's easy for people to take that resentment out on you because you're here.
Yes.
And they're not.
Yes.
And that's a process of healing and understanding the difference between all my trauma and separating that from who's here right now.
Right. On the top of that, Norm, we newcomers and refugees, we really honor this land. I've people who know, I mean, the newcomers that know about Indigenous people, I've seen the amount of respect and wisdom they have is so high, and I could feel that.
That's been my experience.
Right.
And it was surprising to me in the beginning because I shared some of those, because Canada does the same thing to us. teaches us stereotypes about Sikh people, Muslim people, Chinese people, and we believe them.
Yes.
And so we have these misconceptions and stereotypes and distrust until we spend time together, and then we realize, holy cow,
It was
it's
so
all
different.
lies. It's all lies.
It's all lies.
And that actually, you're in the same boat as us.
Right.
But somehow they've got us, you paddling that way and us paddling this way, and trying to get away from each other.
Right.
And certainly not sharing food and making friends so that we can help each other.
Right.
But yeah, amazing people that I've met in my work now. And I'm counting on you all.
Thank you, Norm.
When it comes time to say, we're going to stand up now.
Right.
And we're going to have a conversation about what's really best. How can humans really live in these lands in a good way together? And we're going to start asking those questions about these rules that have been posed on us and you. Who wrote those rules? Why? Do those rules benefit you or me? No, me neither. So why can't we have better rules?
Right.
Let's have that conversation. You get a vote, I get a vote. Together we all get a bunch of votes.
Right.
Who says we can't change it?
True.
Right? So I encourage people to remember those 2-word questions we learned as children.
Absolutely.
Says who? Why not? Since when?
Right.
Whose rules?
What happened?
What happened?
I would like to, this thing I had in my mind, Norm, that I wanted to invite so many refugees or newcomers that have no idea, or some of them has so many questions about Indigenous culture and what does this land mean to them and where are we settling right now. And I was planning to do that, a kind of workshop to bring people to the library or somewhere and then invite someone who knows a lot about the land and that the land that belongs to them and give a workshop to them. Maybe we can do that for our community so that newcomers get to know about the land more in future also.
Well, even if you can find a piece of nature somewhere and be there and relax and calm your mind and sense into that land, and especially if there's water, and sense into that water, or sense into that tree, sense into the roots, sense how deep it goes, how far it reaches,
Right.
sense how long these relationships have existed between this water, this land, this tree, and all the things that they've seen and experienced together, and all the things that they know about this place. And then sense, because if you're sensing into it, you are connecting to it.
Right.
And sense that connection that is actually possible all the time with everywhere if you work at it.
Definitely.
Then you'll realize that connecting with that deep, ancient relations is medicine. It's healing. It will help you be stronger, to heal, to understand that the more you reach for it, the more you get back from it.
Right.
And then you get a sense of, I can sense a connection and a relationship with this tree, this giant cedar tree, or this water that's been here forever. And if you sense how far that water reaches and how deep it goes and all the other water that it's connected to, and then to remember that you are water.
Yeah.
And your water is related. And you're only borrowing your water for a little while. Your water's coming in and going out. You're recycling it, and you're
Right.
part of the cycle of all water.
Right.
And so to recognize it, this is not the same water that I was born with,
No.
right? It's all different water. And who knows where those water molecules are now? They're somewhere.
Yeah.
So you're part of water. All the water on the planet is connected. And
It's
you're
beautiful.
part of it. Even the water molecules at home, where you started, some are left there, but they've been in you and out of you.
Yeah.
And quantum physics now says all that stuff is possible.
It is.
Those connections are real. Science can't deny it. So we understood,
Long time. You understood thousands years of ago.
and your ancestors
this.
did too.
Yes.
They had
Possibly.
deep understanding and wisdoms about the nature of the universe.
Right. Thank you so much, Norm. At the end, I would like to ask if you always, as I told you, like Indigenous language. I want to hear more about it. This would be the last one. If you can say anything to people who are watching us, this podcast, advice either in English or in your mother tongue language.
About language?
About anything, if you can speak either in English or in your mother tongue language. Any advice or anything at the end, I would say.
Okay, well, I don't. So we never say goodbye. That's part of who we are, because we understand that really nobody ever gets to leave the universe,
Right.
right? No matter what, you're still in the universe, no matter what. Before you were here as a human,
Yes.
and after you leave as a human.
Yeah.
Somehow you're still in the universe. So we only say, Aatchan, and that's to see. Aatchan, Chiskan, Gasmuta. I will see you next time. So there's other things in the language too, like we say Takam Shnaknukwa, which is all my friends and relatives, which means not just people, though, right? It means the land and the water and the tree and the mountain. And that means everything. So
Everything.
we have to have that respect because it has spirit. If it exists, it has spirit.
Right.
So maybe that's the way to explain what the Great Spirit is
Yes.
the spirit of all things. And so of the universe. So that was the original instant of transformation, when Great Spirit transformed into the universe.
Right.
And you're part of it, right? Unless some people think that they're separate, right? From everything, from each
Right.
other, from the planet, from the land. That land is not me. I'm separate from it. It's stupid. Like, you're separate from the planet, really?
That's not possible.
You're separate from the universe, really? and I think that's what leads to ways of thinking like Elon Musk, who
Right.
thinks that he can just go to another planet and start over. When you got this one, why? Why not learn how to take care of this one? Either way, if I was going to talk about a fundamental way of being, and if I would ask people to see if there's a way that this would fit within your traditions, is my understanding of the lives of the elders, our old people, how they live their lives. They notice everything. And it's the natural state of your mind, of the human mind, to notice, to learn, to pay attention, to notice things, right? To notice imbalance, to notice one tile out of place,
Right.
to notice a crooked line, to notice something. So we have all those senses to notice all those things. And there's more than 5, right? Not just what you see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, but to notice with your heart, to notice a disconnection, to notice when you feel a connection to someone or some place, to notice that, to notice all those things. because that's one of our amazing gifts as humans, that we were given to be born human, is to have all those senses,
Right.
to notice. Because then you were given all the other gifts to restore balance.
Mm-hmm.
You have the gift of dexterity and ingenuity and creativity and mathematics and everything to restore balance and maintain balance, but not just of humans, but of all things.
Right.
The balance of the river with the mountain and the weather and the sun. The subtle ways of moving things back towards balance. And if there's one thing we can recognize today, is so many things are way out of balance. But we have the gifts to move it back towards balance instead of the imbalance that exists now. So notice and transform. Those would be, it says more than, I used to say listen and help.
Right.
Because that simplifies it so that children can understand. Listen and then help. And that's our nature. And as nonprofits, and of course, nonprofits exist to help refugees and newcomers. And
Definitely.
that's what all our teams do. That's the basic nature of all our work, is to listen
And help.
and help. To say, what's needed? You need help. We heard it. These people need help. We heard it. We listened. And tell us how we can help, and we do it. Our staff does it. Our volunteers do it.
Yes.
And that's what nonprofits around the world do. They listen
And help.
and they help. And I think, but it's bigger than that, and because we have to get past the idea that we only have 5 senses,
Right.
so we have to notice. And then we have to understand that we have so many gifts to transform, not only ourselves, but the world around us.
Right.
So,
Wow. Thank you so much, Norm. As you mentioned, yes, listen and help. That's what all these nonprofits are doing. I mean, we're all working for nonprofit. I mean, and also these nonprofits are doing a wonderful job. Frog Hollow, Mosaics, Access, or Collingwood Neighbourhood House.
yeah, all the
or
houses.
the Link gathering that we did.
Yeah.
And yeah.
AMSA and
AMSA, MAP.
yeah.
There are a lot of people. If I miss anyone's their name, like apologies.
Diverse city.
Yeah. Diversity. There are a lot. Yeah. Apologies if I
PICS.
Pics.
PERS.
Yes. And then all of them in Vancouver. Thank you so much for doing wonderful jobs.
We're counting on you.
Definitely. Norm, I wish we could have more time, and definitely I'm looking forward for a second episode, maybe after some time. Myself and everyone who are listening right now love this podcast, of course, would love to hear more. I wish we could have more time. Thank you so much for coming and accepting our invitation.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Anytime. And we're thinking of doing similar, so I might ask you to help us to do some podcast at some time too, because
Definitely.
we've been thinking about it, talking about it, but it's a step that we don't understand completely. We think it would be a good idea, but to have some regular conversations, maybe even some live stream things
Absolutely.
where people could ask questions and have
then
conversation.
We can answer.
Yeah.
This would be wonderful. So this is going to be big after this podcast. I and Norm will be live.
Okay. So we're going to move to what's next.
Absolutely.
We're going to listen and help.
And listen and help. Wow. A beautiful thing that I will take this from podcast, listen and help, and I will keep doing that.
Yeah, until
Thank
next
you.
time.
Until next time.